Oh, welcome to this edition of the Yahowah blog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. We're going to complete our series, this episode of Sukah. This is the 8th day of Sukah. It is a Shabbaton. It is symbolic of camping out with Yahowah forevermore. The first 7 days of Sukah are all devoted to a singular idea, and that is that God, after long last, after 6,000 years, is inviting us back into the garden of great joy. And by us, I mean, a relatively few number of us. The only ones who will be invited in are those who have capitalized upon Yahweh's offer through his beloved son, to David, who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim so that we might live, so that we might have our guilt, particularly religious and political corruption, expunged from us, and so that we might be part of the covenant family, enriched, and empowered by God. This is precisely what he is offering, and he will also include those who partake in the Shabuah harvest, which is a result of Bikurim, and those who are gleaned on to Ruwach. The others that will be included in this event, in this return to Eden, will be the remnant of Yisrael and also some supportive Goy who have been drawn into Jerusalem by Yahweh to benefit from the sacrifice of the Yira'ah. This then encompasses the sum total of those who will enjoy this time with our God, where we are sheltered and protected by him. And that is what Sukah means. Sukah is not about living in huts or in booths or in tents or any other kind of contraption. It is about being protected and enclosed by God. It is identical to the concept of Gan, as in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, which was a protected and sheltered enclosure. God is encouraging us to accept this gift and to return to the garden at long last, 6,000 years after we were escorted out. And so the more we learn about the garden, the more we'll be prepared to enjoy what God is proposing from Sukah. Now, as it relates to this 8th day, it is symbolic of eternity and of going with God well past this 1,000-year celebration of life on earth into eternal life, where our playground becomes the entire universe. So this is what's being offered. I would love to see many of you there. Understand admittance is based upon God's rules, and he has a fairly strict criteria as to what is allowed and what is not, who is included and who is included. And of course, this begins by recognizing and cherishing Yahweh's name, by accepting and embracing all that Yahweh accomplished through Dode, his beloved son, when he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah. It is a time to celebrate the harvest and a time to approach our God. Now, in the 16th chapter of Debatim, words, Deuteronomy, Moshe reveals more about what it's like to camp out with God. And matter of fact, this is probably not so much Moshe speaking as Yahweh using Moshe's mouth, speaking to us through him. So let's pick up God's story with the invitation to Pesach, so that we maintain our bearings throughout. He says, be observant, closely examine, and carefully consider. Shamar, Passover, Pesach, continuing to move in a straightforward fashion while removing all confrontational obstacles to approach Yahweh, your God, engaging in and acting upon it in association with the month of Abib, the first month of the year at the beginning of spring, when the grain of the barley plant is in the ear and yet still green and growing. What that essentially means is the renewal of light on the moon's surface closest to the vernal equinox. That is the first month of the year. That is Abib. It is exceedingly symbolic because Bokurim is a barley harvest, and it is timed such that the kernel of the barley, representing those saved souls, is still receptive, green, and capable of growing. And Passover is this opportunity to approach God, the very doorway to his home and to life. Something that God is inviting us to engage in and to act upon in association with the month of Abib. If you are not doing this, then you are never going to come into proximity of God. And that would eliminate all Christians and all Muslims. And as we shall find out in just a moment, it will also eliminate all of those who practice Judaism. Indeed, in this time of renewal of Abib, Yahweh your God brought you out, removing you from the crucibles of religious and political oppression in Mitzrayim during a time of great darkness. Nothing is darker than the bite and constraints of religion and politics. And so this was to be a time of renewal when God led the Exodus, Yahtzah, as a great liberator. And therefore, we can now directly associate the Miqra, these invitations to be called out and meet with God, with liberation from religion and politics, from the control of man. They are directly related. Prepare the sacrificial offering so that it is ready for consumption of Pesach, Passover, to approach Yahweh your God from the flock, with the lamb serving as a sign. In the morning, to encourage being perceptive, seeking information, and then responding appropriately in the home to take a stand and be established, where to reveal the benefits of the relationship is preferred and chosen by Yahweh, such that his name will live and reside there. Dabarim, words never should have been called. Deuteronomy 16:2. So here we are with God telling us that if we're going to capitalize on Pesach, which is to move in a straightforward fashion, and as we found out, away from religion and politics, we must be observant. We must closely examine and carefully consider what Yahweh has to say. And this, of course, only applies to those who are interested in approaching Yahweh, who is God. And that we do this by actually engaging in and acting upon that which we have closely examined and carefully considered, and in association with the month of Abib. If you don't know what Abib is, you don't know how to tell time based upon God's cadence, then you're going to miss out, aren't you? And if you're celebrating something other than Passover, like Easter, you're in real trouble, aren't you? So this is a time of renewal. That's what Abib represents. Yahweh, your God, brought you out, removing you, leading the Exodus from Mitzrayim, which is the plural of Sarah, preceded by Meh, which means to ponder the implications of Sarah, to be troubled, to be confined, to be abused, to be in dire straits during the time of great darkness. So prepare the sacrificial offering of Pesach. That is a lamb that serves as a sign. Yes, it is a lamb that is the sign of Pesach, and it is God's beloved Son who volunteered to serve as that that lamb. And you should do so in the morning to encourage being perceptive, seeking the information to respond appropriately. It's Yahowah𤄄𐤄𝐄𝐿, which, by the way, also speaks of making sure that you get what you need to know about this sign of the lamb from the person acting in the role of the bull. And do so in the home to take a stand and be established, the appropriate place that reveals the way to the benefits of the relationship, which is chosen by Yahweh, so that his name appears. To Yahweh. Find a place like Yahowah𤄄𝐄𝐿.com, Yahowah𤄄𐤄𝐿.com. Find a place where his name is foremost, like the Yahweh blog, like Yira'ah on YouTube. Go to such a place where Yahweh's name is preferred above all, such that his name abides there. Every place that we tread, you will find Yahweh's name. You should eat it in association with yeasted bread. Oh my goodness. And so there is a direct correlation between Passover and Shemitz. And so it says, you shall not eat it in association with yeasted bread. No yeast at that time. For 7 days, you should consistently consume it with matzah, unyeasted bread. So the lamb is to be nourishing of those who are in observance of Passover, but without the presence of Shemitz, which is something that is soured and embittered, cruel and ruthless, oppressive in nature, as a fungus that permeates everything. Because for 7 days, you should consume it consistent with matzah, which is not just unyeasted bread. Matzah is the name of the most important of all Miqra. It's the most essential, the most set apart. And so here we find that Passover, which provides life, has to be enjoyed in association with matzah and has to avoid Shemitz yeast. Why? Because yeast is the very problem. Do you know someone who is named embittered, who is rebellious? Would be Miriam, wouldn't it? Moshe's sister. That's what the name means. And she was stricken with leprosy by God because she wanted to take the religious approach that the rabbis have taken, that they too speak for God. And God said, no, you don't. There's also the waters of Meribah, based on that same word, where the children of Israel were so obnoxious with God that he essentially gave up on them. Yeast is this souring and embittered, ruthless, oppressive fungus that is being also associated with the very place that the children of Israel were withdrawn. he wants you to withdraw the chametz because you were drawn from Mitzrayim. So Mitzrayim, this place of religious and political oppression, is what God drew his people away from. And to commemorate that, we are to remove yeast from bread. Chametz. They are equivalent. The chametz is religious and political oppression. Now, we do so for 7 days. So you should consistently consume it with matzah. Matzah. It is the bread of affliction and oppression, of persecution and harassment, and having been forced to bow in religious subjugation. Oni is a really bad term. What it's saying is that I want you to know that matzah is about affliction and oppression. It is about persecution and harassment. It is about being forced to bow to religious subjugation because God despises these things. And it is this fungus of religion that has caused people to suffer in this way, to be subjugated by religion, particularly as Christianity did to his children, that is so so oppressive, that God says, it's that stuff that I'm removing. And I want you to understand that by consuming this, that is what you're removing. I want you to have an appreciation also that my beloved son, Dod, his nefesh soul, would be afflicted and oppressed, persecuted and harassed because he was willing to carry your guilt into Sheol to deposit it there. And so God is reminding them, yes, that matzah is all about the fact that for indeed you were brought out and taken away, withdrawn and removed from the realm of religious and political oppression, Mitzrayim, with a sense of great urgency. Yeah, so God did something he very seldom does. With a very firm hand, he was resolute in removing his children, the Hebrews, the Israelites, from Mitzrayim, because what he recognized is that they did not know enough at this point to make an informed decision, and that he had to get them out of there or they would have been obliterated by that religious and political cult, that nation of abuse. And they didn't just abuse the Jews, they also abused their own. So in response to this witness, you should always remember to proclaim all of this regarding the most memorable of men, all the days of your lives, because on this day you were brought out of the land of the crucibles of oppression. Yes, again and again, matzah is being associated with being removed, disassociated from religious and political oppression and guilt, religious and political control. Yeast, sa'or, which is the fungus and fermenting agent from sa'ar, to be the residue left behind, shall not be seen throughout your territory for 7 days. Get rid of it. That is the purpose of this day. And regarding the flesh of your body, which beneficially as a result of the relationship has been endowed as an ongoing gift as part of the sacrificial offering, during the evening of the first and foremost day, it shall not remain overnight. Devarim 16:4. Here, God is reminding us that there can be no bodily resurrection, that Christianity, the most popular religion in the history of the world, the most oppressive religion to his people, that it's utter nonsense. It's the bashar, the flesh of the body, this corporeal manifestation of the biological being. Dod's nefesh soul would occupy a body for this purpose, and that it is the sacrifice. The soul is what made Dod. It's what caused Dod to be God's beloved son. It continued on, but the body was sacrificed. And so, for the benefit of what he's done and to appreciate it, remove all traces of this fungus of religious and political oppression that he removed from us at this time. And then make certain that you understand that it is essential to take that body, which no longer has any value, Dod's soul has moved on, that body will simply be incinerated that night. So to be consistent with the Torah, your Jebus, Sawi folks, could not have been bodily resurrected because the body, had he been the real deal, of course he wasn't the real deal, it was Dod who did this, and God is saying that he is going to eliminate that body that night. It has already served its function, and it is the gift. It's part of the sacrificial offering. And this is during the evening of the first and foremost day. The first and foremost day of Chag Matzah, of course, is matzah. And that is why it shall not remain overnight until morning. This would be during matzah. And by the way, Dod's gone. During matzah, his soul enters Sheol, which is equivalent to hell. So you should not continue to make a practice of actually failing to understand that which is associated with the gift of the sacrificial offering of Pesach, Passover, within the context of one of your interpretations of that which Yahweh, your God, is placing before you as a gift so you can approach. Are you familiar with the line, a child was born, a son was given? The ultimate gift of God is that of his beloved son, Dod, fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim in year 4000 Yah, which is 33 CE. This is what we must understand. This is what we must grasp to prevail. It is God's gift to us. Nevertheless, it is unto this place to reside and to take a stand, where to show the way to the relationship Yahweh your God prefers and has chosen for his name to abide and remain. Yahweh's name does not abide and remain in a building. At this point, the building didn't exist. These children were nowhere near Jerusalem. Jerusalem wasn't even part of Yisrael, and Yisrael didn't exist at this time. There was no temple. There was no Temple Mount at this point. There was no city of Dod. There was no Jerusalem. And so God's not addressing a city or a building at this point. He's talking about the place where his name resides. How about here? How about in the covenant family? How about in the Yahweh blog? How about at Yira'ah.com? How about any one of those places? How about all of those places? How about in his beloved son, Dod? We are all a place where Yahweh prefers and has chosen for his name to abide now and forevermore. This is where you should consistently offer the sacrifice associated with Pesach in the evening as the sun goes down at the appointed time of the eternal witness and the restoring testimony. When you were brought out of Mitzrayim, serving as a metaphor for societal, religious, political, military, and economic oppression. Mitzrayim, Dabadim 16:6. You shall cook it and eat it within the location which Yahweh your God chooses concerning it. And you should turn to face him, entering his presence and appearing before him in the morning to encourage, being perceptive and discerning, seeking the information which is available, and then respond appropriately, even to the bowl. Yes, we come out in the morning following Pesach, which would be matzah. And we need to appear before God because this thought is exposed to God. Now that our guilt has been removed, we should feel very comfortable in his sight. Then go to your brilliant dwelling and home, your brightly shining encampment and household. OL 16:7. This is the only time associated with a Mow'ed Miqra that God speaks of going to a tent. And what he is saying here has really nothing to do with a tent. So Sukah cannot be living in tents if the only mention of tent is associated with what is really matzah, the morning after Pesach. And what the concept here is that after you become immortal, as a result of what Dode has accomplished on Pesach, you become perfected by God, your guilt removed on matzah, so that morning you can appear totally exposed before Yahweh, and you're brilliant, you're shining, your home is God's home. That's what he's saying. You're enveloped in a shimmering covering of light. 6 days you should actually and consistently consume matzah, unyeasted bread. Now, from that point on, it would be 6. Otherwise, it's 7 overall. And on the 7th day, come together for a celebration to approach Yahweh your God. So there is no reason to perform the service of the Malaka, this spiritual counselor and heavenly messenger. Devarim 16:8. God is presenting that 7-day celebration of Chag Matzah as 6 days plus 1 day to drive home the concept of man who is equated to 6 because he was born on, they're conceived during the 6th day, plus God who is 1 equals God's idea of perfection of 7. And so this matzah, unyeasted bread, is for our benefit. And for us to recognize that that 7th day is a celebration. And it's all so that we're prepared, becoming immortal and perfected, shining brilliantly and covered to approach Yahweh, our God. And because you are receiving this notification and this explanation from the Malaka, from this messenger and spiritual counselor who is infused with the 7 Ruwach spirits of Yahweh, you don't need to do his job. The Malaka's job is being empowered and enabled by God himself for this purpose. So you should consistently recount the written documentation communicated on how to relate to 7 and 7 sevens, the promise of 7, and thus weeks, Shabuah, as it pertains to you, beginning from bringing the sickle, this implement for liberating, separating, and gathering the standing grain, that which is upright, firmly rooted, from whom to stand upright and rise, to be ratified, confirmed, and established, then raised. begin to recount the written word regarding 7 sevens, because this is the Miqra. It's a time to read and recite the very word of God. So God reminds us, begin by recounting this written word regarding the promise of 7, the Devarim 16:9. Then you should act upon and engage in the festival feast of Shavuot, to approach Yahweh your God with something that works as a solvent to cleanse an appropriately affordable portion from a os, an ultimately insignificant and essentially otherwise workless but invisible and dissolvable substance, voluntarily offering of one's own initiative, of your hand, which to demonstrate the way to benefit from the relationship you can actually and consistently give, when compared to how in this relationship Yahweh your God continues to bless and to adore you. The Devarim 16:10. God is offering us more than we can imagine, and he is not expecting a lot in return, but he is expecting something. He is, first of all, expecting that we're going to act upon and engage in Shavuot. It is 7 sevens plus 1 after matzah, or just 7 sevens, 49 days after Bikurim. It is a celebration of all things related to 7. It is the middle of the 3 times each year that we meet with God. Its purpose is to approach Yahweh. And we approach Yahweh cleansed with the solvent. We recognize that there is a voluntary offering of someone's initiative, a free will contribution and donation, demonstrating one's being willing to volunteer for this mission, serving Yahweh and those being harvested in this way, of your hand, which is to demonstrate the way to benefit from the relationship. This is something God says you can and should consistently give, particularly when you realize that when we work with Yahweh, we may be diligently digging and working the soil and tilling it and watering it and the like, but God can do the same thing the entire world over, the entire universe over. He is just much better equipped at it than we are. And what he returns to us is so much greater than what we offer him, because God continues to bless and adore us, all for the benefit of this relationship. You can genuinely rejoice and be glad in the presence of Yahweh, your God, you and all of your sons and daughters, your male and female employees, the Loe, those who to benefit from the relationship are in your communities, and those of different ethnicities and cultures, the orphan, and those who are lonely and isolated, along with the widow and those who are forsaken. Now, I want to be a little bit careful here, because if you're going to be exacting in this, every item on that list was singular. And your son and your daughter. So for the one coordinating this harvest and making this free will contribution on behalf of the beneficiaries of Shavuot, it is said that he has a male and female offspring. Now, this would not be biological, but instead 2 people who have directly benefited from what he has offered in terms of knowledge of this covenant family, and have become his spiritual sons and daughters as a direct result of what he has born in them. So there is someone who is a son someone who is a daughter, someone who is a man, and someone who is a woman who are co-workers. Now, it's also likely that the son and the daughter are also co-workers. And so we have so far 2 women and 2 men who are engaged in this covenant. There is a uniter, Eloi, someone that kind of keeps everybody together, working harmoniously. And then there is those, or the one who, for the benefit of the relationship, is in your community of a different ethnicity and culture. There is a gor. So after the one who is the kind of the coordinator or the loe in this regard, there's going to be someone who stands out distinctly as a foreigner who is sojourning with the Israel. And then there is an orphan, someone who came into this relationship whose father and mother were not covenant and were not particularly close. They have left this individual such that he now needs his heavenly Father. He needs to be part of this covenant family. And he represents someone who might be considered otherwise lonely and isolated. And then there's the widow who has been forsaken. So all of this is such that these individuals want to be led, such that he and she are on the correct path in your midst, standing up at the place which to show the way to receive the benefits of the relationship Yahweh your God chooses for his personal and proper name to dwell and reside. Now, these 8 individuals appear again during Sukah. So they are likely those who are going to assist Yada and Elia, the bull and the goat, prepare for Dod and Yahweh's return, and then who are going to work collaboratively going forward in Sukah to educate and serve the mortal remnant of Yisrael who has entered the garden, as well as administrate over the Goyim workers who will be part of that community. You should remember that you were slaves, that you had no rights in the religious and political oppression of Mitzrayim. Therefore, you should be especially observant, shamar, so that you act upon and engage in that which is associated with these inscribed prescriptions for living, which cut you into this relationship. Pay attention to what God is saying, in other words. He is not going to change. These are engraved prescriptions for living. There is no eraser for these. They are chiseled in stone. And so you should actually engage by continually participating in the festival feast of Sukah. So here we go. We've done Chag Matzah, and from Chag Matzah we did Shavua, and now we're in the Chag Sukah, the festival feast of Sukah, on your behalf, which is for our benefit, for 7 days, when you gather in your harvest, which occurs on Teruah, the first day of Chag Sukah, from your threshing floor, where the kernel of useful and pure grain is separated from the chaff, and from your wine press. So this is the comparison that Yahweh wants to make, the prescription that he would have us perceive to understand the difference between man's world and God's realm. It is Mitzrayim versus Chag Sukah. And the choice is to be made with our eyes and minds open, such that we are observant, that we're prepared to act. even to engage in a relationship as Yahweh intended, should we so choose. To appreciate this contrast with man, we have Mitzrayim, the constant erosion of freedoms and the degradation of rights through political and religious institutions, in addition to economic and military influences. While there have been a few fleeting moments of liberty, the constant and unrelenting drumbeat of civilization has been to control. And the methods have been many, including the demonization of others, leading to invasions, genocides, and conquests. Man has also imposed economic caste systems, which have been ubiquitous and debilitating throughout human history. For the past 6,000 years, kings and khans, emperors and pharaohs, Caesars and czars, generals and dictators have imposed their will on everyone else, suppressing all dissent. God says, I don't want any part of that nonsense. I'm here to liberate you. Now, the methods have changed somewhat today. There are many echoes still of the past. Monarchical and maniacal dictators rule the Middle East. The world's most populous nation, China, is a communist dictatorship, wherein the 93% who are not party members are no better off than slaves. More than 1 billion Roman Catholics swear allegiance to their Pope. The second most populous nation, India, still has a restrictive and penal caste system. I think India may have actually passed China just recently in population, but their caste system is repressive. And Western democracies have become much more socialistic, more controlling, with state influencing almost every aspect of a person's life, indoctrinating their children into compliance. So throughout most of man's history, there has been very little difference, if any separation, between religion and government, with these human contrivances working collaboratively to suppress and control the masses. But even today, when there are some nations creating a distinction between the secular and sectarian, the most virulent control mechanism is still religion, because belief systems neutralize an individual's ability and also willingness to think independently or rationally. Politics does this as well. And to this crippling influence of conspiracy, and we have a recipe in this case for the zombie apocalypse, what I would call the ambulatory dead, the Marxists on parade, the religious at their gatherings. And to this, we have a healthy dose of conspiracy commingled with religion and politics, creating what is something that is just ultimately tranquilizing and paralyzing. To appreciate what God is offering to withdraw his family from, it is germane to realize that the world's experience with fiat currencies and deficit spending to prop up the illusion of solvency is just a house of cards. The impending economic collapse awaiting America and Europe is going to be so severe that it will make the Great Depression look like a bad day at the office. And then look at what happened with COVID-19, the mutating virus that brought the world to its knees. Billions of people willingly allowed their governments to usurp their liberties and their livelihoods while destroying everything that they had previously achieved. And all the while, nations have censored free speech more so every day, whereby any criticism of progressive ideology or Islam, which are now together, is resolutely banned. And if that were not enough, the threat of global warming is going to be used as a means to restrict business and prosperity while at the same time redistributing the world's remaining wealth, essentially bankrupting the only hope of recovery. And throughout the process, the lone, credible, and rational voice, that of science, is being politicized such that it has become part of the problem. Now, this obviously is a horrifying portrait of what is to come, but I can assure you I'm not exaggerating, and there is no cure. Furthermore, when people get desperate and nations fail, they turn to anarchy, to crime, to war. The irrational justification for riots and looting spurred by conspiracy, and the case, for example, of Black Lives Matter, quickly spread globally. Seeking someone else to blame for unfulfilling lives is why people the world over clamor for revolution and for war. While Israel will be their initial target, as we have seen, this interwoven fabric of alliances will turn Sunni against Shia, Europe against Russia, the United States against China, and billions will die. By the time we turn the page past 2030 and the two witnesses arrive, the world will be quite unrecognizable. Yahweh's approach is the antithesis of nations and religions. It begins with liberation, the deliverance from being controlled. It presses forward with unrelenting truth, such that we can distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad, and then individually we are afforded the opportunity to choose between what mankind has to offer and what God is providing through his covenant and through his Mow'ed. Are you returning to Mitzrayim? Are you headed to Sukah? Well, Shelters is quite simply a celebration of our return to Eden, to great joy. The threshing floor is symbolic of grain without chaff, those who have emerged from the grinding pressures of a collapsing world into the covenant. Likewise, the crushed grapes turn to wine, the chaff is blown away, the pits of the olives perish, all while that which God values is brought into his protective garden. This festival feast of camping out with God is the result of the first 6 invitations to be called out and meet. Spared from death on Pesach, Passover, perfected from our religious and political crimes on unyeasted bread, we're adopted on Bikurim, firstborn children, also enriched and empowered. This prepares us for the harvest of Shabuah and Teruah, where we're afforded the opportunity to come home. Thereafter, those who litness to the witnesses, who capitalize on the sacrifice of the Yah𐤄𤅅𤄗, will be reunited on Kippurim, the day of reconciliations. Those who have made this journey with us are prepared to celebrate Sukah, Shelters, by camping out with Yahweh forevermore. So you should rejoice. You should celebrate in your festival feast, this of Sukah. You and your sons and daughters, your male and female workers. And as I go through this list, remember that while I have written this long ago, as it appears in most translations in the plural, it is actually in the singular. You and your son and your daughter, your male and your female worker. The Loe, the one who unites, as well as the foreigner, the ger, who is on this journey with you. The orphan who may have otherwise been lonely, and the widow who was abandoned. All who benefit from the relationship, thoroughly reciting, thoughtfully living within your community. Dabarim, words never should have been called, Deuteronomy 16:14. This list of guests, of course, is reminiscent of the gathering of the Miqra of Shavuah. So in a very real sense, this family reunion is aided and abetted by select individuals who have gathered to serve alongside. The celebration is to be multi-generational. Yes, there will be mothers and fathers. There will be sons and daughters. It will be gender inclusive, and that is something neither rabbis nor imams allowed. It is clearly binary. There is no hidden pronouns. You don't get to choose it. You are he or she, not something of your imagination. And that, of course, is in opposition to the progressives. By the time we reach Sukah, we are home, which means that the Loe who helped us navigate along the way to unify us with God's testimony are also entitled to a staycation. Even the Torah, which brought us together, is going to be replaced with a lowercase Torah, written the same way, just with guidance designed to help us journey safely through the dimensions, universe, and time. Well, Goyim have been ostracized except those whose attitude and aptitudes are well suited to work during this time. Yehudim, who have been abused throughout history, will be the focus of this event, and with them will be a ger, one who has journeyed with God's people, carrying his testimony, and he is invited to stay. The covenant family will continue to be multi-ethnic, which is a blow to the woke mentality of racial division and a very difficult and bitter pill for the practitioners of Judaism who believe only Jews matter. Fortunately for the orphan, who has long served as prey in the Roman Catholic Church, the tormentor will have gone the way of the dinosaurs. They will no longer be fatherless or homeless, neither isolated nor secluded. Those outside the mainstream of society, those cast aside and forsaken, this one will be received with open arms. And this spells an end to sexual harassment. Men will no longer prey on women. The common denominator among these guests are that they will have all sought to have benefited from the covenant relationship and have contributed to it in a meaningful way. They will all be thoughtful and reasonable. The irrationality of religion is something that they will leave very far behind. Now, since Sukah in particular is a prophetic picture of eternity, it's depicted as a party, as a festival feast, as a time to have fun, to celebrate in our relationship with God. While relatively few find their way in, those who do will represent the full spectrum of humanity. Among the partygoers will be men and women, boys and girls, rich and poor. The campers will come from all around the globe in a rainbow of races. Especially important to note is those who have lost their temporal family can be part of God's eternal one. As Yahweh's adopted sons and daughters, we become brothers and sisters. Yahweh created the universe and then humankind for a single purpose, and this is it. Eden is to be our garden party. But for this celebration of life and relationship to be based on love rather than compulsion, there had to be free will, along with an alternative to God's companionship. And that is why the tree of the knowledge of good and bad was necessary then and is necessary again, so that those who now consume it will know how to yada Yahweh and it will direct them back to the tree of lives in the middle of that garden. Now, beguiled by Satan, deceived, Yah𤄄, who was easily played because she wanted to be a mother goddess, she chose very poorly. She twisted Yah's testimony, and then she lured Adam in by handing him the fruit. And so it's time that we resolve all of that and that we return to the intended purpose of this relationship. So God says, celebrate for 7 days along with Yah𤄄, your God, in the residence, in the standing place, in the home, in the dwelling, in the location, in the site, which to show the way to benefit from the relationship Yah𤄄 has chosen and prefers, because Yah𤄄, your God, will kneel down in love for your benefit to bless you. Devarim words, Deuteronomy, which is what never should have been called, 16:15. Celebrate this relationship. I can't emphasize this enough. Dode knew this, which is why he partied so hearty with God. He was very comfortable in Yahweh's presence, as we should be. We need to develop a relationship with God that is not based on the controlling and depressing nature of religion, but is instead based upon celebrating every moment of this relationship with our Father. And we do it symbolically during Sukah for 7 days, plus the 8th day for eternity, all spending quality time with God in the very place, the site, which to show the way to benefit from the relationship Yah𤄄 has chosen, the place he prefers, even with his chosen one. And this is because Yah𤄄, our God, wants to do as a loving father. Rather than us getting on our knees to try to lift him up, which is ridiculous, God is saying the right way to look at this relationship is I will get down on my knees to lift you up. I will extol you. I will commend you. I will adore you. Really a very powerful portrait of what God intends. And this is because Yah𤄄, your God, will kneel down in love for your benefit. He will bless you, diminishing an aspect of his nature to lift you up, commending you. And all of your endeavors, all of your explanations, and all that you provide of value, your logical thinking, your understanding, your profound insights, your reasoned speech, your discernment, as well in all of the work that you have accomplished under this influence. Then you will be altogether and totally content and happy. The Devarim words should never have been Deuteronomy 16:15. God wants us to be totally content, ultimately delighted, happy, joyful, returning to Eden, the garden of great joy. And he is going to lead us to this place by lifting us up for our benefit. And then it is his intent to collaborate with us, to work with us, to work through us. And particularly as we tabuah, we provide value to this relationship. We make our contribution through these kinds of communications, that we excel at logical thinking, leading to understanding and profound insights, as well in all of the work that we accomplish under this influence. Yes, indeed. Then and only then will you be totally happy and content. And so we're told 3 times indeed each year in the conduct of your life, and for the purpose of renewal each year, every one of you should remember to appear before Yahweh, your God, beside the place within the sight, which to show the way to benefit from the relationship he has chosen and preferred. For the Chag festival of Matzah, for the Chag festival feast of Shabuah, 7 Shabbats, and for the Chag celebration of Sukah, where we are sheltered and protected. And they should not appear before Yahweh without good reason or without what is expected. We must think our way to God. We must act upon and engage in what God has laid out for us and reason our way to him, which is the very purpose of Yahweh. I provide for you from him what you need to know to make an informed decision about this relationship and then capitalize upon it. This is what our God is offering. And so each individual's contribution to the relationship should be consistent with his capability, his aptitude and attitude, and in proportion to the favorable pronouncements, subsequent blessings, resulting productivity and prosperity bestowed by Yahweh, your God, given to you for the benefit of the relationship. We should all contribute. The more we can do, the better. God has given each of us tremendous capability to contribute. And he is providing much more than we could possibly give. But the more we give, the more we offer, the more we do, the more comprehensively we serve, the more devoted we are to sharing this message to all who will listen, the more rewarding the experience will be in Sukah. And the more we will come to know that our God appreciates what we have done. This is a collaborative effort. This is a family. And Sukah is the result of the family business. I thank you so much for listening. May you have a joyous 8th day of Sukah.